Caught in the Act was something that we did because we wanted to do something that embodied what we thought the Outer Limits was, which was very scary, very provocative, thought-provoking, a little sexy. We wanted to kind of set the bar. That was our first season. We got Melissa Milano. She did an amazing job. And it was a really great episode because it had a mix of both really gruesome, bizarre, freakish stuff, and it was also kind of titillating, and it also allowed us to explore the edges with Showtime because we were on Showtime, so we didn't have to worry about language or nudity or anything else. And yet it also had a really sweet ending. It was really at the end about redemption and about these two people and the power of them coming together, which, you know, resolved itself, which was actually kind of an anti-Outer Limits type ending. It was not what you expected to see, so I kind of like that too. It wasn't just a flip and then she explodes and you never see her again. It's like there's a really nice, sweet, weird ending with this big butterfly floating up to the ceiling. So I like that too. What's really interesting about that show is you can see, I think, the progression of visual effects. Caught in the Act is a first season show. We're experimenting with visual effects still and how to use them. There's some things in there that I think I look at now and I kind of cringe at because it's not exactly what I would be doing today. But 7 years ago, it was also just at the forefront of a lot of different things, computer animation and compositing. You know, back then a morph was still actually an interesting and novel thing. So there's stuff in that episode that I think is really interesting to track, especially if you go through and look at that show and the visual effects in that show and then look at some of the later seasons. I think you definitely see a progression in terms of the quality of the visual effects, and that is definitely a function of less of money and more how much you can do with the money you have.
One of the joys of the first season was that I had elected to create a show, but the way I wanted to create a show was to actually be the person who didn't possess it. Now, this may sound totally wacko, because if Gene Roddenberry creates Star Trek, you think of him as being the mentor and the controller of all the things that go into the show, and you look at every question has to be directed to him. But I felt with a show like The Outer Limits that was morally wrong. It wasn't my show. I didn't originate it. I was helping to bring it to a next level of an audience. But what I really felt was important was that I create an environment where great ideas win. And essentially what I set out to do was to create a think tank where people who had the same kind of speculative imagination that I have could come and bring their ideas, and that they would be in a community of other people who are trying to help them give their ideas strength and bring them to fruition. And I call those people story midwives. And the people who in our business are not sensitive to the creative arts are people who I call story Frankensteins, and they want you to rip the head off your child, stick another head on it, and they want you to pull one leg off and see if it runs better with one leg. And there are other people who are much more caring and aware that great ideas start off like tiny little children. If you shout at them, they go away. Sometimes you need to nurture something to pull out all the potential nuances. And so I call those people story midwives, because they're not trying to tell you what it should become. They just are urging you to have the strength and courage to give birth. And so I wanted to create a community of people who worked together, who didn't feel that anybody had any particular control, so that they didn't feel like their ideas were being taken and used by someone else, that they could actually stay on their shows. And so each of the individual guys who wrote scripts for us were then allowed to continue through with the scripts to the floor, to shoot it with the actors, to be around the whole process, so that they were able to take their vision and give birth to it. And I felt that was really important, because we're doing an anthology series where each individual show is vitally important, where there is no continuity of characters. Not like next week you tune in and see the same guy played by John Goodman appearing again. So it had to be the best show each week it could possibly be. And my thinking was, the only way you're going to get that is to free people to make it their show and not make it my show. And so I stepped back as much as I could and took a kind of a a benign, encouraging position, and really was delighted to see the results. You know, shows like Caught in the Act, a friend of mine wrote from Canada, and I was surprised. I'd started off with a little squib in the Bible that we'd written, and he took it and grew it into a giant seed, and it became a wonderful show. And there's a joy in seeing people achieve things that you could never achieve. It's exciting when you see creativity and it blows your own eyeballs out. That's fun, and so I got a great deal of pleasure from that first year because the theory seemed to work.